this world.
Hey there guys, welcome back to the Comics Crusade. We are in the third week of the month of July, and this week I think we've got a pretty good show ahead of us. We have 9 comics in front of us, mostly Marvel this week, but got some Batman to talk about, and we're actually going to have a look at an indie comic called East of West that I'm going to talk about for a little bit as well. But before we get into the comics themselves, I usually try to, just give some basic thoughts before we get into things. And this one I was kind of curious about because I was having a discussion in my Discord server with one of my patrons, and there was a thought that I had, is I wonder in general if a lot of people like characters in comics, or if sometimes they're just looking for somebody in a costume doing cool stuff. That's what I wonder. And I've wondered that about some comic book fans ever since I used to talk with other people on comic book boards 10 odd years ago, is oftentimes the discussions would be around power set and what somebody could do and things along those lines, and not really about the cool stories that were going on. And I just kind of wondered, are you interested in the character or the power level? So I've always found that kind of interesting about some fans. I genuinely wonder if, like with a Batman, if they're looking for a dude in a bat suit beating people up, or if they're looking for an interesting, complex character that has a lot of ins and outs to him. Things along those lines. So keep that in mind when it comes to the way that I review comics, is I'm looking at the character. I'm trying to see whether or not something interesting is going around the character himself, as opposed to just them doing cool stuff. So, one other note. I'm not saying doing cool stuff is bad at all, because there are comics in this list for this week where it's basically just cool stuff, but I sometimes would like a little bit more depth. There's nothing wrong with having empty or sort of empty action at all. But on occasion, I need a steak. I need something with sizzle. I need something with a bit more meat to it. I need something with a bit more substance. But let's go ahead and get started on the ins and outs. Batman number 51. So let's go ahead and get an issue that I had with this book out. But it's an issue that I will give credit that somebody that I played D&D with, Artemis Worm, pointed out to me, is Batman being on the jury. So this comic takes place after Bruce has brought in Mr. Freeze on a murder beef. And Bruce himself is on the jury. And not only is he on the jury, but he is interviewed by the DA and by the defense. And despite his prior relationship in the public with Batman after Batman Inc. and other situations, which is referenced in the book, the reasons and his thoughts behind Batman aren't really efficient enough for me to think that the defense would say it's okay that this guy is on the jury. That's just my perspective, after I've been convinced that. What I would have liked, and there is a point in this book where it's established, A, that Dick Grayson has taken up the cowl of Batman for now, but where he fights Killer Croc briefly, that I think you could have cut out and had a couple of pages or a page of Bruce getting interrogated by the defense, and have it in sort of the same style you do Mr. Miracle, of the 9-panel comic book page. I think that would have worked pretty well. So, minor gripe in my opinion. The rest of it, though, I really did like. I like the fact that post-Batman 50, that Bruce really is just not where he should be mentally. I like the fact that he's recognized that he's not there mentally after what he did to Mr. Freeze within the issue, and you see exactly how brutal he is. And you see him say to Dick Grayson, for better or worse, take up the cowl, and you see him just out of sorts. Now, whether it's because of Catwoman leaving, which I'm thinking that's the reason, or it's something else that's going on, or if it's just sort of that and the sort of existential crisis that Batman has had since the I Am Gotham arc, way at the beginning of this run. Wondering if it's just all weighing down on him at this point, and if at some point he's going to have to realize that he has been broken. Needless to say, I hesitantly recommend this one because the twist at the end is really good. And it is a good sort of peek into Batman's mental status. But again, I'll agree with Artemis that the editor of the book really needed to tighten the leash on Tom King a little bit on this issue. Just a smidge. And I think that it would have been even better than it was before. But, Bruce, we need to talk about your choice in suits here. Salmon? Ugh. Good God, man. That's why I'll even say, like, Batfleck had better choice in suits than this. And, of course, Christian Bale had that 2-button Armani that was really nice. Come on, Bruce. Step up your suit game. Get on it, man. It ain't that hard. You got all the money in the world. Justice League number 4. This is going to be pretty quick. It's still crazy. There's this whole Ultraviolet Corps. The universe is getting taken into different dimensions, and both Superman and the Martian Manhunter have been brain-possessed by Joker and Lex Luthor at the frickin' Source Wall. This book is crazy. But that's the interesting thing about Scott Snyder. Everything he writes is crazy. He's a really creative guy, which is part of the reason as to why I really like him on this book, and just in general, why I tend to like his work. I didn't think that, again, that he didn't work that well on Batman, but even when I'm down on him, his creativity is really good. He's sort of like Grant Morrison, but consistent, for better or worse. Because with Grant Morrison, you never know what you're getting. Well, prior to 13 years ago when he wrote All-Star Superman. Before that, you just didn't know what you were getting with him. After that, you know it's going to suck. Batman of Zur-En-Awe, anyone? Regardless, this was a good comic. A lot of fun, a lot of craziness going on. You really don't know how it's going to end up. But, dear God, it's a fun read, and the art is stellar as well. Avengers number 5. So, Jason Aaron, we got to talk. The myth here that you've put in of how Marvel Earth was created, you basically ripped it off of Prometheus. That's basically what it is. Except the Celestial that died because of this plague, he didn't ingest the plague of his own will, I'm assuming, to create life. Wow. That's the one part of it that really, really got my goat in this issue. The rest of it is solid writing. Again, Jason Aaron's characterization is really good here. He really does portray these characters in a way to where you can like them and they're fun and they're not out of character or anything along those lines. It really is just a very solid, fun team book. This issue, I think, was a little bit weaker than the last because of that gripe that I just mentioned, but even with that gripe, the rest of it's pretty cool. And I'm even starting to get behind Robbie Reyes, the Ghost Rider, as a hero and as somebody who could be in the Avengers. I'm just kind of hoping that they're going to get to the fact that he murdered the last Starbrand. Not the one in Hickman's Avengers, but the most recent one. So, needless to say, though, it's a good issue. I recommend it, but again, that one little thing that we've been holding out on to find out exactly how humanity was a mistake really ended up being underwhelming because, again, you ripped off Prometheus. X-Men Red number 6. Tom Taylor is another mixed bag of a writer. He can write good stuff. He can. But every single time X-23 and Gabby show up, I want to skip the fucking page. You wanna know why? Because they don't talk like people. They don't. They don't talk like people. They talk like like they're just deliberately trying to be cute and they're not. You know that type of like fake cute that you see on the internet from some girls, like they're acting what they think you think is cute as opposed to what is actually adorable about a woman sometimes, like, or about a kid, and that's just naturally cute. Like that's the kind of stuff that I just despise. And it really just kind of tells me that Tom Taylor can't write women younger than the age of 30 very well. He just can't do it. The rest of the issue is interesting. I like the way he's taking on Cassandra Nova. I like the setup that the X-Men have, but just I can't stop thinking about fucking Gabby going, Cerebro. I want her to die. I want her to die violently. I want her and X-23 to just not exist anymore. Just no. Get rid of them. Wolverine, you can't get back fast enough, I swear to God. Needless to say, I can't fucking recommend it because of that. It just drives me fucking crazy. Ugh. This team would be so much better if you just get rid of Gabby, get rid of X-23, because you don't really need her, and just have Namor show up more often and be badass. Like, it's not hard. Come on. Immortal Hulk number 3. So this issue's interesting, and I think that's really all I could say about it. It's interesting. The book is told from several perspectives as a journalist is interviewing them looking for Bruce Banner. And that is something that I find neat. But the problem that I have with it is that the first 2 issues came across like they were kind of going for like a Swamp Thing vibe. And they were really cool little stories. And then this 3rd issue, because of the perspectives that it takes, the attempt at levity does not resonate. Doesn't resonate very well at all. And it really throws the book off. Levity in a horror story is something that you have to put in sparingly. It has to be either complete and total black humor, or you have to be able to have somebody within the story itself who people will find humorous and not overbearingly trying to be funny. And that was what I had found the problem was here, is he's trying too hard to be funny. Some people aren't that funny of people. You're just not. I will admit I'm one of those people. I don't think I'm that funny. And that's okay. Some people just don't have that spark. And I don't think that the writer of this book necessarily has it either. He tells a really good, serious story, but this sort of a attempt at humor just doesn't really resonate with a book that's supposed to be and has been advertised as a horror book. So I'm going to have to just say it. You can safely skip Immortal Hulk number 3. The only thing that is really worthwhile and worth mentioning about it is, again, the twist at the end. So, it is what it is. Tony Stark, Iron Man 2. So, unlike some of my peers, I actually did like the first issue of this series. This one, I kind of felt was a little bit I didn't really get into it as much as I would have hoped. The reason for that is I kind of feel like, again, Dan Slott was just trying too hard. And this is just the theme of the week in a lot of ways. You're kind of trying a little too hard. I like the idea of setting up Sunset Bane possibly as another business rival. I like the idea of them going there and Rhodey having problems of being in the suit because of his memories of dying and having been hurt and beat around so much for the last decade. What I don't like is it basically being there to get Rhodey out of the War Machine armor and into a mech that looks like Ed 209. I'm not a fan of that plan. I would much rather see Rhodey overcome his fears and have some time to, use that to develop the character and have an interesting arc with him. It's like Dan Slott sees that interesting arc that he's been set up with at the beginning of the issue and just throws it out. And I don't like it when writers do that. You know, if you want a change of scenery for a character, if you want them to do something different, that is not the way to do it. Do not sacrifice a potential good character arc just for a change of pace. Just don't do it, because it does not really help the story. It doesn't. And in this case, it doesn't aid the story at all. Other bits of it, though, do set up decent intrigue. I'm interested to see exactly how the Controller is going to continue to screw with Stark Industries, and it could end up being a pretty good story down the line. But, and this is a pretty big but, like a Mary Jane Watson in the last issue of Amazing Spider-Man size, but that's in the future. That's not now. And I would have much rather we had seen more of that than really anything else. So what I did like, Sunset Bane, I did like the idea of how Tony solved the problem in this issue. I liked the idea of it really feeling like Tony and Rhodey were in danger. I didn't like the switch out of the War Machine suit, and I'm not a big fan of just that in general. It's not a bad issue, it's just not a great issue. It could have been more than what it was. So unless you're a diehard Iron Man fan, I can't really recommend this issue to you. Not safely. The Life of Captain Marvel 1. So I went into this comic expecting to hate it. And I kind of do. But not for any huge reason. Something about the feeling of this book just felt, again, kind of try hard, kind of trying to be edgy. It's just the theme of the week. People are trying to be something that I don't really feel is necessary to be. Carol Danvers already has built-in struggle in the fact that she is an alcoholic. That is there. It's not going anywhere. This book had some positives. The relationship between Carol and Tony is something that should be emphasized, given that Tony was her AA sponsor. The reason being is that this book, to my recollection anyway, retcons Carol Danvers' father as being an abusive dick. If I remember right, in the comics, he didn't start drinking until Carol went into the Air Force. So this idea that she grew up in this household where her father was this child-beating scumbag is just, yeah, it's disgusting. I cannot stand this sort of thing. You know, Joseph Danvers, again, never really came across like that in the comics from my recollection. So come on, really? Do we have to retcon this sort of thing to just give another edge? I'm guessing the person who wrote this, who I know has written this character before, probably didn't research the character. All she saw was strong women and then decided to go with it. But I do like the fact that they're taking Carol back to being long-haired again, which will probably end up with her not being written to be as butch-looking. Still, this sort of thing just drives me crazy. Again, there's already stuff there to work with and to make and tell good stories, and you refuse to do it. Dan Slott refused to do it, now this chick decided to do it as well. And I can't stand it. Cannot stand it. So, needless to say, no, The Life of Captain Marvel is not good. And I don't know why I expected it to be even halfway decent. Nobody, it seems, has been able to write Carol well since the Quesada era. This just... fuck this comic, man. Fuck it. East of West, number 38. Hey, what do you know, an indie comic. So, some of you may have heard, because I've mentioned it before, I am a big fan of Jonathan Hickman. I really, really dig his writing. I love his style. And on this book, it's him and Nick Dragata as the artist, with Frank Martin doing the colors. And it is, for better or worse, a story about the apocalypse, but told from this sort of cyberpunk / Wild West sort of a scenario. And I will admit, it's heavy on dialogue, and it's a little decompressed. With that said, Jonathan Hickman is masterful at crafting really solid dialogue. He's one of the few guys that, in my opinion, can tell this kind of a story that's a little decompressed, that's got a lot of dialogue in it, that's got a lot of those elements to it, and it can still be incredibly compelling. This is a guy that, for better or worse, could write a Game of Thrones style series and it would be perfect. And I think that's kind of the feel he goes for with East of West, is it to feel kind of like the comic book version of an HBO story or something you'd see on HBO or Showtime. It is sort of Game of Thronesy in that way. There's a lot of politics, and this particular issue highlights them, especially with the Kingdom of New Orleans. And I love the way that it's all put together. I don't want to spoil it though. So let me just say this about East of West in general. If you've been reading the series up to this point, yeah, you're definitely going to want to pick this issue up. If you haven't read East of West yet, this is a book you want to pick up in trades. You don't really want to pick it up issue to issue like I do. The only reason that I do is just because it's something that I've been hooked on for a little bit. But you want to pick this up in trades because they read better as trades, in my opinion. Because decompressed storytelling, or these widescreen comics, as some people like to call them, really don't come across very well issue by issue, which is why I don't like it when a lot of comic book writers do that, because they really just can't pull it together. So, yeah. Needless to say, I like East of West. If you haven't tried it out yet, as a series, definitely look into it. I think you'll be satisfied with what you read, especially if you're already a fan of Jonathan Hickman's style of writing. Thor number 3. I wasn't really that impressed with this particular book. I liked the last one because there was some action in it. There was this interesting idea of the Sons of Odin getting back together and all that stuff. But in this one, it kind of shits the bed because now everybody's fighting each other and it's just kind of a giant mess. And this was what I was worried could happen when it comes to Jason Aaron's writing. He is very much capable of writing something really good or something at least fairly interesting or fun and then shitting the bed the next minute. He will just randomly spurg out and suddenly start going while he's writing. And I'm sorry, it's just not good to see. I'm kind of depressed by it, you know. God. Now, I will say this. The nature of the issue itself is probably the problem. And again, the last page of it does show something that is quite interesting in how this could go. It was set up in The Unworthy Thor and is now coming to fruition. So, we'll see how this goes. I'll be honest. I'm just going to spoil it. Thanos shows up. Which, I love Thanos. One problem. I don't like how Jason Aaron writes Thanos. So, let's see how things go. It could be really interesting again, but this issue, I can't really recommend it. It just didn't really have... It didn't have as much cool stuff as I kind of had hoped, but yeah, it just kind of was hollow, to say the least. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this week's Crusade. And wow, that didn't end up being as positive as I thought it was going to be. But, on the flip side, no Brian Michael Bendis, so there is that. So, for those of you whose livers have been suffering, I have mercifully not found an old Brian Michael Bendis comic to torture you with. So, regardless though, I do appreciate you watching. Again, tell me your thoughts from what I had opined on at the beginning of the show on comic books. Just let me know what you think about that. If you really are the type of person, if you really dig the ins and outs of the character themselves, or if whenever you read a comic, you're just looking for fun action, you're just looking for, you know, the explosions and stuff. I'm just curious as to what people are looking for, because I've noticed that my perspectives tend to be very different than a lot of my peers. All right, folks, I really appreciate you all stopping by and watching Comics Crusade. If you can, please consider becoming a patron. If you become a $5 or more patron, then you can actually recommend a comic for me to read, and I will read it as long as you are a patron, even if it's a terrible book. Though I'm assuming that's probably why you're donating, is because you want me to riff on it. Regardless, I appreciate every single one of you for stopping by. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and hit the notification button. My name is Micah Curtis. I'll see you next time. Deus Vult.